And the movie version, I'm played by a total babe. Heaving a sigh of exasperation, I squeaked open the truck door and, with my trademark endearing clumsiness, fell out face first. But before I hit the asphalt...
Phil was there to catch me. Having covered the 75 yards from his luxury car to my truck in 0.2 of a second, although fortunately nobody noticed this because Phil is brilliantly clever and the other students at Creepstone High have the observational skills of boiled ham.
He swooped me into his arms using the super vampire strength that he has, in addition to his super vampire speed, and his ability to read minds, perform complex mathematical calculations in his head, assemble a working nuclear submarine entirely from clock parts, and recite all the lyrics to Guys and Dolls. Backward.
Good morning, he breathed.
I was unable to respond because I was so stunned, as I will be many more times in this novel, by how unbelievably handsome he is. His perfect face, and chiseled cheekbones, and his gorgeous eyes that change color depending on how recently he has sucked all the blood out of a live bear.
His perfectly tousled, teased hair down over his broad, gorgeous forehead, speckled with beautiful little perfect beads of condensation caused by the fact that he has the same body temperature as an Eskimo pine.
Let me go, I insisted in a tone of determined insistence.
Why? He questioned, arching a single perfect, gorgeous eyebrow into a quizzical arch.
I have to get to class, I asserted, struggling ineffectively to escape his powerful yet sensitive grasp.
There's plenty of time, he retorted with a twisting smirk of his perfect lips.
Maybe for you, I objected with a wry smile. We can engage in this kind of witty banter for pages on end. Finally, relenting with a sigh, Phil gently put me down in the parking lot and began walking towards the school.
We were joined by Phil's brothers and sisters, who are all also gorgeous, brilliant, wealthy, sophisticated, centuries-old vampires, posing as high school students for reasons that are never totally clear.
As we entered the school, I felt Phil's grip tighten, possibly fracturing my ring and index fingers. Looking up, I saw the reason. Stuart was striding toward us in an ominous way.
Stuart is a member of an indigenous tribe of Native Americans who become werewolves at puberty in addition to developing acne. They do not get along with the vampires. One time in phys ed, the two sides played each other in volleyball, and before it was over, 7 civilians had been disemboweled.
This could have created a real stink had not the Creepstone High authorities, who were even less observant than the student body, concluded that the cause was an unusually fast-acting stomach flu.
Tension still simmered, as I could see by the dark look in Stuart's brooding, smoldering, husky eyes.
He is not as handsome as Phil, who makes Brad Pitt look like a yak rear.
But he's still attractive in his own lanky, darkly smoldering indigenous tribal way.
And it goes without saying that he's in love with me and wants to marry me. I'm in love with him too, but not as much as I am with Phil, who, if all goes well, is going to make me a vampire soon.
So we can spend all eternity being gorgeous and sensitive and sucking on bears together.
Long live that day, but I hate knowing that I'm hurting Stuart so badly by being so attractive to him without trying to, or consciously realizing that I'm doing it. Hello, Stuart, I mouthed, with a facial expression of sorrowful chagrin. He looked at Phil with a look of pure, lanky, indigenous hatred before turning to me and replying, with a voice drenched in the aching and smoldering longingness of a powerful emotion that I knew he could never express in words.
Hello.
What do you want? Hissed Phil through his perfect white teeth.
I'm not talking to you, leech, retorted Stuart.
With a flash of anger that made me afraid he was about to sprout full-body fur and teeth the size of steak knives, which could lead to bloodshed, death, and, if school authorities witness it, detention. Stop it, you two, I protested, my heart filling with despair at how much these two attractive males, despite being mortal enemies, with completely different lifestyles and diets, were so much alike in the sense of being insanely crazy for me. What is it, Stuart? He looked at me with his dark, lanky eyes.
For a moment, I saw in his expression the thoughtful and caring young man with whom I had shared so many emotional moments in the previous book without ever actually doing anything. Suddenly, his expression changed to one of dark foreboding. "If you go out in the woods today," he whispered hoarsely, "you'd better not go alone."
What? I protested elliptically, but Stuart was already striding lankily away. I turned to Phil, but before I could speak, I was struck dumb by the perfection of his chiseled cheekbones, and the realization that of all the girls in the world, I was the one he found irresistibly attractive, as so many males do, although for the life of me, I don't see why, because as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing special about me. Finally finding my voice, I inquired, what do you mean by that?
Mean by what? Replied Phil flatly.
About me not going into the woods alone, I clarified.
Phil turned his perfect gaze upon me, causing me to be once again struck by how gorgeous, etc., etc. I'm sure it's nothing, he soothed calmly. I'm especially sure it's not Denise, the vengeful psychopathic female vampire from the previous book who has vowed to hunt you down and torture you to death and who's been sighted recently in the woods around Creepstone. There is definitely no need to worry about that. With a quick glance at his brothers and sisters, who sprinted off towards the woods at speeds in excess of 180 miles per hour.
Despite Phil's reassurance that there was something in his tone that troubled me, what was it? What had Stuart been trying to tell me? Was something about to happen? Would I soon find myself in yet another dramatic plot situation filled with peril? And why did everybody find me so attractive? Before I could answer these questions, the bell rang. I've got to get to calculus class, I explained with Rue. There's a test today.
You'll do fine, kidded Phil with an impish grin on his perfect features.
Not if I don't get there, I bantered in reply as I turned with such haste that in my endearing clumsiness I would have smashed face first into the large plate glass main door.
If Phil had yanked it off of its hinges with one hand and flung it aside, decapitating two freshmen. They were not major characters.
I could not help but wonder as I hurried off to class that this was an omen of bad things to come.
How was school today? Inquired my father Pete, looking up from his newspaper.
Fine, I responded non-committally.
Listen, he continued, you seem a little distracted lately. Is there something wrong?
I hesitated.
Pete is chief of police in Creepstone, but he's not exactly Sherlock Holmes, if you catch my drift. He has so far failed to pick up on the fact that my boyfriend is a vampire and my other boyfriend is a werewolf, and that Creepstone, not to mention the entire state of Washington, is teeming with violent, homicidal, supernatural creatures, about 60% of whom are trying to kill me personally.
No, I responded simply. There's nothing wrong.
Satisfied, Pete grunted and returned to his paper. Then, remembering something in his mind, he looked up again. By the way, he intoned, I want you to stay out of the woods.
Why? I inquired, gloatingly.
There's been some trouble.
What kind of trouble? I probed.
In the past 2 days, 158 hikers have been killed in the woods around Creepstone.
Killed? I queried. I felt a cold feeling shoot through my veins like an intravenous slushy. How? I elaborated.
All of them were violently dismembered, apparently by someone or something with incredibly savage strength. Some of the victims were scattered as far as 2 football fields from their bodies.
But how? I began searching for the words to complete the question that was even then forming in my brain. How did 2 football fields get into the woods?
Pete shook his head and shrugged, raising and lowering his shoulders to indicate he didn't know the answer. That's got us stumped so far, he expressed ruefully. Also, we can't figure out what's killing these hikers. I mean, sure, we usually get 2 or 3 violent dismemberment hiker deaths a week around here. That's been going on as long as anyone can remember. But 158 dead in 2 days seems like a lot. Doc Smelkins examined all of the bodies we were able to find and ruled out natural causes, such as hookworm. Right now, we're working on a theory that it could be a bobcat or a pack of unusually aggressive squirrels. But until we get this figured out, I don't want you to go out in the woods, okay?
Nodded pensively. Phil had also mentioned something about the woods. What was it?
At the thought of Phil, I allowed myself a small smile of happiness due to the fact that he is so incredibly beautiful and chiseled. And yet he still chose me, with all of my trademark quirks, over all of the other women in the world, including Angelina Jolie.
I remembered that Phil had mentioned Denise, the psychopathic vampire who was stalking me for the previous book and has been spotted recently in the woods around Creepstone. Could she have something to do with the 158 slain hikers? Should I mention any of this to Pete? With all these people being slaughtered and with him being responsible for the safety of the community, shouldn't I tell him about the imminent danger so he could protect himself and all other innocent human lives being threatened? Nah. The more I thought about it, the more I knew what I had to do. I had to go out into the woods alone. It sounded crazy.
Like the plot of a bad horror movie where the teenage girl hears a scary noise in the basement, but instead of doing what anyone with an IQ higher than a chicken nugget would do, namely sprint out of the house, she goes down into the basement.
I knew what I had to do, because that's what I always do. I place myself in grave plot peril when there is no coherent reason to do so. Some people may call this ridiculous, but I'm guessing that some people have not sold 50 million books to date. I knew Pete couldn't do anything anyway. It was up to me. Only me. Me. Just then the doorbell rang. I wondered who it could be and decided to find out by opening the door. Doing so,
I saw Sven Lindstrom, a tall, extremely handsome boy who's captain of the Creepstone High football team and incredibly popular. He could have any girl he wanted.
I love you,
He emoted.
Sven, I spluttered. I can't.
I know, he interrupted. You already have Phil and Stuart, but I don't care. I love you, and although I could have any girl I want, I will always love only you. If it makes a difference, in addition to being attractive physically, I am a member of the supernatural American community.
You, I expostulated. I thought you were of Swedish descent.
I am, he concurred, but the males in my family carry a terrible curse. When we're under great emotional stress, we turn into
Turn into what? I pressed.
Zamboni machines, he blurted.
No, I reacted in horror.
Yes, he whispered hoarsely. We transform, then break into skating rinks and resurface them repeatedly, whether they need it or not. We can't stop ourselves.
I thought that was just a myth.
I wish, he regretted.
I was afraid to ask the next question, but I could not stop myself because of my trademark inability to cease emitting dialogue. What if there's no ice rink?
We'll do frozen ponds, or even driveways, he sobbed ashamedly. Any reasonably level ice-covered surface. He put his head in his hands, sobbing.
You have really nice hair. It's not your fault, I added.
Marry me, he urged.
Sven, I sighed. I can't.
I will make you happy, he broke in persistently. I will love you and worship you forever, and you will never again have to contend with bumpy or pitted ice.
It was very tempting. But I knew from experience that if I let Sven on, I would only break his heart and probably place him in mortal danger of being killed. I knew I had to make it completely, undeniably clear to him that he had absolutely no chance, or his life would be ruined, and it would be all my fault. Maybe, I declared.
Really? He exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with joy like twin blue spherical orbs equipped with some kind of internal illumination.
Yes, I allowed. Then, with my trademark unbelievably annoying emotional incoherence, I added, no.
Wait a minute, he puzzled. I'm not sure whether you're saying yes, no, or maybe.
I am, I affirmed.
You are what? He pressed.
Yes, I clarified.
What? He chagrined.
Before I could answer, I felt a jolt as I suddenly remembered something. The main storyline. I had to get back to it. I'm sorry, Sven. I apologize. I'm about to go get myself in grave plot peril, so I have to go.
But, he commenced,
Maybe in the next book I curtailed closing the door. Through it, I heard a wail, followed by groans of pain, followed by a clanking, followed by the whooshing sound of sidewalk ice being resurfaced in an emotional manner. I had no time to think about Sven now. I had to think about how anguished I was, with all these powerful emotions swirling around inside me like a smoothie being blended from various emotional fruit. I did not know what peril I was about to face. All I knew was one thing, the most important thing of all. Whatever happened, it would involve me. I stumbled through the woods, tripping with clumsy endearingness over the logs that lay everywhere, like the corpses of dead trees knocked down by gravity. It was getting dark.
And I knew that Phil would be out looking for me, with his tawny eyes nestled in the chiseled perfection of his face. Stuart would also be looking for me. I knew that if Phil and Stuart ran into each other, they would probably get into a supernatural high-speed fight, and one or both of them could be badly injured, or even killed.
I felt guilt gnawing at the pit of my stomach from within like a family of angry gastrointestinal ferrets. I wish I could die. I wish that a big electrical thing of lightning would come shooting down from the sky and kill me, or at least that an editor would cut out some of these interminable monologues about my feelings. But I knew that could never happen, as it would be a violation of my contract. Suddenly I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. A chill slithered up my spine like an ascending iguana wearing tiny booties made from pieces of fudge-sickle as I saw the terrifying, shadowy figure step menacingly into the clearing. With a shock of recognition, I recognized who it was.
Barbara Walters!